Confidence in your expertise isn't just about speaking loudly or asserting yourself in a room. It's about carrying the quiet certainty that you know your subject inside and out, even when others try to question it. For Jasmine Crockett, this wasn't a theory. It was something she had lived over the course of her career. Her legal training, countless hours preparing for court, and years in public office had shaped her into someone who could stand in the middle of pointed questioning and still keep her composure. That day, when JD Vance leaned in with a tone that suggested doubt about her understanding, she didn't flinch. She knew where she stood. She knew what she knew. And that kind of confidence doesn't happen overnight. It comes from years of building a foundation that no single exchange can shake. The thing about confidence in your expertise is that it doesn't require you to fire back instantly at every challenge. Crockett could have jumped in, cutting Vance off mid-sentence, but she didn't. She listened fully, letting him finish. That pause wasn't hesitation, it was strength. It showed she was not rattled by his framing of the question, nor by the subtle suggestion that she wasn't fully prepared. She understood that reacting defensively would only validate the premise of his challenge. Instead, she gave him the space to say what he wanted, knowing that her knowledge would carry her through once it was her turn to speak. And then, something unexpected happened. In the middle of this political exchange, a voice rose from the gallery. Dr. Robert Ellison, her former law professor, had been sitting quietly, observing. He hadn't planned to speak, but he had watched enough to know that the conversation was tilting in a way that needed balance. Without raising his voice or breaking decorum, he addressed the room. His words weren't just praised, they were a record. He recounted her years as a standout student in his class, her ability to dissect complex legal arguments with precision, and her work ethic that often had her staying long after lectures to challenge assumptions and explore deeper interpretations of the law. This wasn't the voice of a friend defending her. It was the testimony of a mentor who had witnessed her mastery firsthand. JD Vance, to his credit, listened. He didn't interrupt Ellison. The room shifted not because someone had come to rescue Crockett, but because the weight of Ellison's words reminded everyone present of a truth that can sometimes be overlooked in political sparring. Qualifications are earned long before the moment they are tested in public. Confidence in your expertise is reinforced by the years of work that preceded the challenge, and in this case, it was undeniable. When it came time for Crockett to answer, she did so with the same steady tone she had maintained all along. She didn't feel the need to mention her professor's defense directly or to draw attention to Vance's earlier tone. Instead, she addressed the policy question thoroughly, breaking it down point by point. She used concrete examples, referenced relevant statutes, and anticipated counterarguments before they could even be raised. Every sentence underscored why she was in the room, why her voice carried authority, and why attempts to undermine her understanding wouldn't hold. Her approach in that moment illustrates something crucial. True confidence isn't about proving someone wrong, it's about demonstrating that you were right to begin with. It's not rooted in ego, but in preparation, discipline, and consistency. That day, her poise showed that she didn't need to win an argument to validate her expertise. The validation was already in her history, in her work, and in the eyes of those who had seen her at her best, long before she sat across from JD Vance. It's worth noting that even without her professor's intervention, Crockett had the ability to handle the moment. But Ellison's presence and his decision to speak out highlighted something else about confidence. Sometimes it inspires others to stand with you. His words didn't just bolster her credibility in that room, they reflected the confidence he had in her, built over years of watching her excel. That kind of endorsement doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's earned through consistent proof of competence. In politics. As in any field, challenges will come from unexpected directions, and sometimes from people who are just as skilled at framing narratives as they are at policy. JD Vance came into that exchange prepared to test Crockett's footing, but what he encountered was someone whose grounding went deeper than any single debate. That's the essence of confidence and expertise. It's not the armor you put on in the moment, but the foundation you've laid long before the moment arrives. It's knowing that even when someone tries to question your place at the table, the work you've done speaks louder than the doubts they try to raise. And on that day, in that room, Crockett's work spoke for itself, with her professor's voice simply amplifying what was already true. The power of allies often reveals itself in the most unexpected ways, and for Jasmine Crockett, that truth unfolded in a single, understated moment. Political hearings are rarely environments where anyone outside the committee dares to speak. But that day, the quiet voice of Dr. Robert Ellison shifted the entire tone of the room. Ellison wasn't there to make a statement or to insert himself into the political back and forth. He had attended purely as an observer, a professor who enjoyed following the careers of his former students. Yet, when he saw the way JD Vance's line of questioning was shaping, something in him refused to remain silent. Crockett had been answering with patience, listening carefully, letting Vance build his premise. He was framing his questions in a way that subtly implied she might be out of her depth on the topic at hand, a classic tactic in high-pressure settings. For most people, that kind of framing can be disorienting. It can make you second-guess your approach, push you into answering defensively, or cause you to stumble over details. But Crockett wasn't stumbling. Still, Ellison could sense the energy in the room, shifting not because she lacked skill, but because perception is powerful, and once doubt is seated, it can take root quickly. Ellison had known Crockett long before she had a political platform. As her law professor, he had watched her dissect dense legal texts with the patience of a surgeon, cutting away unnecessary language until only the core arguments remained. He had seen her lead study groups, not for extra credit, but because she wanted her peers to succeed alongside her. He remembered the times she challenged him not disrespectfully, but with a curiosity and confidence that forced him to revisit his own assumptions. Those qualities had been clear to him years ago, and he wasn't about to sit by and let a carefully staged political exchange cast her in a lesser light. Without raising his voice. Ellison spoke. It wasn't a grand, dramatic interruption. It was measured, precise, and deliberate. He introduced himself for the record, explaining that he had taught Crockett in multiple advanced law courses. Then, in a calm but steady tone, he laid out the truth. Crockett had been among the top of her class, mastering complex legal frameworks, and applying them in real-world simulations with unmatched skill. He mentioned specific instances how she had argued a mock appellate case so persuasively that even visiting judges had remarked on her ability, how her legal research papers had been used as examples for future students, and how she was the kind of thinker who didn't just memorize the law but understood how to navigate its nuances. The room grew still as he spoke. It wasn't what he said alone, it was how he said it. There was no hint of defensiveness, no attempt to attack Vance. Instead, his words were a quiet but firm assertion of fact, a reminder that Crockett's qualifications weren't up for debate. In political spaces, personal endorsements are common, but this wasn't political. This was academic, rooted in years of first-hand observation, uncolored by party lines or public opinion. Vance sat back slightly, his expression neutral. He wasn't visibly rattled, but the dynamic had shifted. The subtle undercurrent of questioning Crockett's expertise had lost some of its edge, replaced by an unspoken acknowledgement that she had someone in the room who could vouch for her in ways no resume bullet point ever could. Crockett didn't interrupt or elaborate on Ellison's remarks. She let them stand on their own. That's the quiet strength of having an ally, not someone who fights your battles for you, but someone whose presence and words can add weight to the truth you already represent. Ellison didn't diminish Crockett's voice. He amplified it. And because he was speaking from a position of credibility earned through years of teaching and mentorship, his words carried a weight that shifted the perception of the entire room. It wasn't about saving her from a difficult question or shielding her from scrutiny. It was about reframing the moment so that when Crockett answered, the audience both in the room and watching from afar would hear her with a fuller understanding of who she was and the expertise she carried. That's something only a trusted ally can do. Step in at exactly the right time, with exactly the right words, to ensure the truth doesn't get buried under the noise. Respect over ego is a lesson that plays out quietly in the background of hypersure moments, and it was at the heart of how Jasmine Crockett navigated her exchange with JD Vance. Political settings often reward sharp comebacks and one-upmanship that make headlines because someone won a verbal battle. But Crockett's approach was different. She didn't treat the hearing as a stage for personal victory. She treated it as an opportunity to keep the focus on the work, the facts, and the integrity of the process. And in that subtle restraint, she demonstrated a strength that is often more powerful than quick-witted retorts. When Vance leaned in with questions framed in a way that cast doubt on her grasp of a particular policy, she could have chosen to meet him with equal force. She could have cut him off mid-question or pointed out the underlying insinuation in his tone. Many in politics would have, and it likely would have made for a heated exchange that people would replay on social media. But Crockett didn't reach for the easy path of ego-driven rebuttal. She listened without interruption, holding eye contact and keeping her expression composed. That restraint wasn't about avoiding confrontation, it was about maintaining control. Crockett understood that the moment wasn't just about her and Vance, it was about the credibility of the discussion itself. In political discourse, when both sides spiral into personal attacks, the public rarely remembers the details of the argument. They remember the chaos. By keeping her composure, she ensured the discussion stayed grounded, and she kept herself in a position to answer with clarity when her turn came. It was at this point that Dr. Robert Ellison's voice entered the room. His decision to speak was not born from ego either. He wasn't inserting himself to win a moment for Crockett, nor was he there to embarrass Vance. His tone was steady, his choice of words deliberate. He identified himself as her former law professor and calmly detailed her accomplishments, both in academia and in professional practice. By doing so, he didn't just defend her credentials. He reinforced the idea that this was not a contest of personalities, but a space where expertise should be acknowledged and respected. Ellison's remarks shifted the energy in the room in a way that sharp words or personal digs never could. The focus turned away from the undercurrent of skepticism and toward Crockett's proven record. And in that shift, something else happened. It became clear that Crockett wasn't alone in the room. She had someone with both authority and first-hand knowledge ready to vouch for her, not because of political alignment, but because he had seen her work and knew her capabilities. That kind of public endorsement, especially when it comes from outside the political sphere, speaks directly to respect rather than ego. Crockett acknowledged her professor's comments with nothing more than a brief smile and a nod. She didn't use his words as a weapon against Vance, nor did she turn them into a moment to claim victory. Instead, when it was her turn to respond, she went straight to the substance of the question. She broke down the policy point by point, addressing the concerns directly and leaving no ambiguity in her answer. Her composure, paired with Ellison's interjection, created a dynamic where respect became the guiding tone of the exchange. This is the subtle but profound difference between seeking respect and feeding ego. Ego might have pushed her to turn the professor's support into a jab or two, press Vance into a defensive corner. Respect kept her focused on the work. It allowed her to use the moment not to dominate, but to demonstrate. And in doing so, she not only maintained her credibility but also elevated the entire conversation. Ellison's role in that moment underscored the same principle. He didn't speak to win points or draw attention to himself. He spoke because he believed in the importance of accurate representation of a person's capabilities. That belief aligned perfectly with Crockett's approach. Together, without strategizing or planning, they created a moment that pushed back against the performative nature of political sparring and reminded everyone present that substance, preparation, and mutual respect still hold value in public discourse. The audience, both in the room and those watching from afar, could see it clearly. This wasn't about outshining an opponent for the sake of pride. It was about showing that when you hold yourself to a standard of respect, you can face challenges without losing sight of the bigger picture. And in politics, that's far rarer than it should be. Staying composed under pressure is a skill that many people talk about but few truly master, especially in settings where every word, gesture, and facial expression is under scrutiny. In the hearing room that day, with cameras rolling and political stakes high, Jasmine Crockett showed exactly what it looks like to keep control when the atmosphere is designed to provoke. Her exchange with JD Vance could have easily escalated into a tense, back-and-forth clash, but instead, she chose to hold her ground in a way that allowed her to remain calm and collected, while still making her points with precision. From the moment Vance began framing his questions, there was a subtle edge in the tone, a deliberate structure to make it seem as if she might be unprepared or lacking in depth on the subject. Many in that position might have reacted instinctively, either by interrupting to correct the framing, or by visibly showing frustration. Crockett did neither. She sat back slightly, maintaining eye contact, her hands steady, her voice quiet. She let him finish every word, not because she agreed with his implication, but because composure often means controlling the rhythm of the exchange, not letting it control you. In situations like this, tension is often contagious. The raised tone of one person can push another into matching it. But Crockett knew that reacting in kind would only feed into the adversarial tone Vance was creating. Her decision to stay calm wasn't just about personal temperament, it was strategic. She understood that anyone watching, whether in that room or later on video, would remember her poise just as much as her words. That kind of composure sends an unspoken message. I'm confident enough in my position that I don't need to be shaken by how you present yours. It was in this stillness, this refusal to be drawn into an emotional response, that Dr. Robert Ellison decided to speak. He had been watching quietly from the gallery, no doubt aware of the subtle game being played in the framing of the questions. As her former law professor, he had seen her in countless hyper-sure academic scenarios before oral arguments, debates, case presentations, and he knew she thrived in them. Yet he also understood how easily an audience can misinterpret a composed silence as uncertainty if it isn't contextualized. Ellison's voice entered the moment like a steady hand on the wheel. He didn't raise the temperature of the room, he lowered it, introducing himself and detailing his history with Crockett. He spoke about her ability to handle complex material, her readiness under questioning, and her proven record of meeting intellectual challenges head-on. His remarks didn't just reaffirm her credentials, they explained the very composure she was displaying. He made it clear that what others might mistake for hesitation was actually the mark of someone who had trained herself to absorb a question fully before delivering a precise and thoughtful answer. By doing so, Ellison gave weight to the moment without breaking Crockett's rhythm. His words reinforced what her demeanor was already showing. She was not rattled, not cornered, and certainly not unprepared. The two of them, without planning it, created a layered display of control, her in the way she carried herself, and him in the way he framed her composure for the room. When it was finally her turn to respond, Crockett didn't rush. She spoke clearly, addressing the points Vance had raised in order, citing facts and avoiding any detours into personal territory. Her tone was even, her pacing deliberate. There were no sharp jabs, no cutting remarks, just a direct, measured explanation that answered every question without leaving room for misinterpretation. If Vance had hoped to throw her off balance, her delivery made it plain that the attempt hadn't worked. Ellison watched from his seat, likely recognizing the same skill he had seen in her years earlier as a student. Back then, it had been in classrooms and moot courts. Now it was on a national stage. The ability to stay composed under pressure is not just a personality trait, it's a discipline, one that takes years of practice to hone. In Crockett's case, it was the result of countless hours preparing for situations exactly like this one. And Ellison's quiet intervention reminded the room that such composure is the mark of someone who has faced challenge after challenge and learned not just to survive them, but to control them. In politics, where exchanges are often fueled by quick reactions and sound bites, moments like this stand out. The lasting impression wasn't of a heated clash, but of a calm, deliberate voice holding steady against a wave of provocation. It showed that composure can be more powerful than confrontation and that sometimes the most effective response to pressure is to never let it see you sweat. The exchange between JD Vance and Jasmine Crockett that day will not be remembered for any fiery outburst or headline-grabbing confrontation. Instead, it will be remembered for the way a conversation that could have spiraled into a tense, ego battle turned into a quiet display of credibility, composure, and mutual respect. Crockett's ability to maintain her focus, answer with clarity, and resist the pull of unnecessary drama was not an accident. It was the result of years of preparation, discipline, and self-awareness. Dr. Robert Ellison's presence and his decision to speak in that moment served as a reminder of the importance of allies, particularly those whose support is grounded in personal experience and professional respect. He didn't defend her with grand gestures or emotional pleas. Instead, he spoke plainly, sharing what he had witnessed over the years, a student who consistently demonstrated depth, skill, and determination. In a space where perception can shift in seconds, his words anchored the truth about her qualifications and character. What made the moment stand out was how seamlessly the two of them worked in tandem without any coordination. Crockett's.com confidence created space for Ellison's voice to add context, and his words reinforced the perception of her as someone who doesn't just hold her ground, but does so with an earned authority. It was a subtle collaboration that showed how respect is built, not demanded, and how credibility is strengthened by the voices willing to stand alongside you. For those watching, there was something quietly instructive in the scene. It was a reminder that power in conversation doesn't always come from dominating the other person or rushing to win the moment. Sometimes, the most powerful stance is to remain calm, to let your preparation do the talking, and to trust that the truth will surface if you hold steady. Crockett did exactly that. In the end, the story wasn't about a verbal showdown between two political figures. It was about how a person's work, history, and relationships can converge to create a moment where character speaks louder than rhetoric. Crockett didn't need to overpower Vance to prove herself. Her composure, her measured answers, and the quiet support from a respected mentor did more to shape the perception of the exchange than any heated words could have. The day's events also underscored a broader truth for anyone facing challenges. In public or professional life, your allies matter, your preparation matters, and your ability to stay grounded under pressure matters. These are the things that carry you through moments when others try to test your resolve. Crockett had all three in her corner that day, and the result was a conversation that ended not with a spectacle, but with a quiet victory, of poise over provocation, respect